Hello there. Welcome back to CADP Coaching in a Nutshell, a video series where I will be sharing meaningful insights to support your work with children, adolescents, parents, and families through the lens of professional coaching. So, whether you are a parent, caregiver, educator, or a professional CADP coach, I'm really glad that you are here. My name is Lux Hettiyadura. I'm a parenting and child development specialist with over 15 years of experience and also the creator of the world's first ever ICF accredited coach education specialization encompassing child adolescent development and parenting. Today, I want to have an insightful session with you about something that shows up in almost every family without us even realizing it. And it's what we call parenting on autopilot, and it can shape generations without a single conscious decision. So, what is parenting on autopilot? Autopilot parenting is when we parent from habit rather than from intention. It's when our responses to our children are driven more by what we have absorbed from our own upbringing and the environment rather than by what our children actually need at that moment. When we talk about reactivity in parenting, it's easy to picture the obvious, like yelling or losing control. At the same time, in reality, reactivity often shows up in much subtler ways. These are those quick, automatic responses that come from emotion rather than intention, usually driven by stress, overwhelm, our unresolved inner wounds, or even fear. And when that happens, reflection, connection, and attunement towards our children often get bypassed. So let's explore how this play out in everyday parenting moments. Sometimes it's in the tone of voice or our body language, like snapping over something small, raising our voices, or sounding irritated without meaning to. And this can also manifest as an eye roll or a sharp sigh or that edge in your voice you didn't notice until later. Other times, it's in the pace and pressure, like rushing through routines with strong commands or interrupting the child mid sentence because we are in a hurry or getting frustrated when they take too long to respond, and so on. Reactivity can also show up as over control, telling the child what to do, how to do it, when to do it, without giving them the space to make their own decisions or learn through their mistakes. And it's when we jump into fix and correct or take over when what the child really needs is support, not control. Then there is the dismissal of emotions. So we may use phrases like, "You're fine, stop crying," which may seem harmless, but in reality, we send the message that big feelings are not welcome. So we may skip emotional check ins or unintentionally ignore signs that something deeper is going on. Another form of reactivity is when we project our adult expectations onto our children. So, for example, expecting a toddler to act rationally or a teen to respond with emotional maturity. And when they don't, we react not because they have failed, but because it touches something tender in us. One of the more hidden expressions of reactivity is withdrawal, the cold shoulder, the silent treatment, or emotional shutting down when we are upset. Although it's not our intention, it can feel like a punishment to a child. As we are exploring some of these aspects, please know that none of these responses make someone a bad parent. They are signs of unprocessed stress and moments where our inner world takes over before we can pause. But the good news is, once we become aware of these patterns, we can gain the power to shift them. All right, now that we are diving into what reactivity looks like in real life, there is a little story I often share because it captures the essence of autopilot parenting so simply, but it also makes a lot of sense. So the story goes that a little girl was watching her mom prepare dinner and she noticed her mom cut the head and the tail of the fish before she placed it in the pan. So the little girl was very curious and she asked her mom, Mommy, why did you cut the head and the tail of the fish before you cook it? And mom said, I learned this recipe from your grandmother. Why don't you ask her? So the little girl went to her grandma and asked the same question and the answer. So the grandma said, Well, I also learned it from my mom and this is how she did it. So the curious little girl, still not satisfied, she finally asked her great grandmother. And this time she got a different response. Her great grandmother smiled and said, Oh, honey, it's because back in my day I had a very small pan and I couldn't fit the whole fish unless I cut it. And back then I couldn't afford a bigger pan. And just like that, it all made sense. 3 generations continued a pattern that no longer served a real purpose at all, simply because no one had ever stopped to question it. And that right there is what often happens in parenting. We inherit habits, beliefs, and some of our reactions, and we repeat them not because they are the best choice for the child in that moment, but because they are familiar to us. And when we parent from that place without pausing, without reflecting, it can start to take a toll on our children in ways we don't always see right away. So, looking at real life consequences, children who grow up in these environments may develop low self worth, difficulty expressing their emotions, trouble trusting and connecting with themselves and others, chronic stress, anxiety, emotional shutdown, and challenges in building and maintaining healthy relationships. And of course, this list can go on and on. The reason why autopilot parenting can be so damaging is because when you think about it, our children are always watching us, always absorbing. They don't just learn from what we say or teach, they learn from what they experience. And this is why we often say a child is a byproduct of the environment they live in. They absorb our energy, our tone, the way we handle emotions, especially during tough moments. So, when we respond with frustration and dismissal or shutdown, they don't just mirror the behavior, but they internalize it. They may start to believe that my feelings are too much. There is something wrong with me. I'm not worthy of love when I'm upset. I'm not good enough, and so on. When those responses happen often enough, children may stop reaching out to us altogether, not because they no longer feel these emotions, but because they no longer feel safe to be seen or heard. However, when we begin to bring presence into our parenting, when we slow down, soften, and really tune in, something shifts because presence can create deep connection, and that's the starting point of mindful parenting. So, as we begin to explore mindful parenting, there is something really important that we must remember. It always starts with being kind and compassionate towards ourselves. Mindful parenting doesn't mean being perfect. It doesn't mean that we will never lose our control or never feeling angry or overwhelmed. Remember, you are a human being after all, and you will make mistakes whether you like it or not. You will have these reactive moments and you will fall short sometimes, and that's okay. You are not alone in this, and it doesn't make you a bad parent. It simply means that you were doing the best you could with the capacity you had in that moment. Just like your child deserves compassion when they struggle, you deserve that compassion too. So remember, mindful parenting doesn't mean that you're going to get it right all the time. It means becoming aware. It means slowing down and tuning in, and also choosing to respond rather than react. Sometimes mindful parenting simply means taking a pause, like stepping away for a moment to gather yourself and your thoughts before saying something you might regret later, giving yourself space before yelling even begins. It means getting curious about your own reactions instead of going straight into blame, asking what is really going on with me right now. So you might start by checking in with your body, noticing a tight chest, racing heartbeat, that tension rising in your head, and then gently asking yourself, what do I need right now? What is really underneath this anger I'm feeling right now? Let's be honest, because sometimes it's really not about the spilled milk or the untidy room or the back talk. Sometimes it's about a deeper need that's gone unspoken far too long. You know, as I shared before, there is something truly powerful about being present. Even the smallest, quietest shift we make as parents can have ripple effect. They may not look dramatic on the surface, but they can lead to the kind of connection that forms from the heart of a truly healthy parent child relationship. So, let me share a moment from my work that stayed with me, which I want to share with you. A mother came to work with me feeling completely worn out. She has a 9-year-old daughter, and she described her daughter as strong willed and difficult, always pushing boundaries and constantly shutting down emotionally. And she said she had tried everything, but nothing seemed to be working. As we explored together, something important came to light. The mom had grown up in a household where obedience was everything. There were high expectations, but not a lot of warmth or emotional connection and support. So, what she realized was she had been parenting from a place of fear, fear of failing, fear of being disrespected, fear of repeating the past. And without realizing it, it was fear that was running the show. And she believed deep down if her daughter didn't obey, it means there was something wrong, not just with the child, but also with her. However, the moment she saw that pattern for what it was, she also saw that she had a different choice. So, together, we worked on shifting the way she responded with no force, with no control, but with pause and curiosity and with presence. She began to meet her daughter with more patience and less pressure, more listening and less fixing. And over time, her daughter started to open up more and more, not because the child changed overnight, but because their relationship changed altogether. That's the power of moving from autopilot to awareness. And this shift, however small it may seem, can change everything. Now, approaching this from a practical perspective, I want to pause here and highlight something very important. This shift from reacting to responding, from autopilot to mindful parenting, it doesn't happen through just willpower alone. It starts with the nervous system too. When we are stressed, anxious, or overwhelmed, our bodies go into survival mode and we become tense, short tempered, and disconnected. And that's often the moment when autopilot kicks in. Because think about it, we are really not trying to be reactive, we are just trying to cope. And in these moments, we can't just calm down because someone said so. You have already tried that and you know what I'm talking about. To truly settle, we need to reconnect with ourselves first. We need to help our body feel safe again so that our mind can pause and we can return to the present moment fully and connect with our child. And this is where real regulation begins, from the inside out. And from that safe space, we can offer something incredibly powerful to our children, which is co regulation. Remember, a calm parent helps create conditions for a calm child. This is something we emphasize deeply in CADB coaching practice because it's not just about parenting strategies or behavior management. It's about presence. It's about being the grounded anchor your child can return to even in the middle of a storm. That's where the real transformation begins. On that note, I will be hosting a virtual workshop diving deeper into the connection between reactivity and our nervous system. And I look forward to sharing some powerful and practical steps that you can take right away to move from reactivity to presence. So if you are interested, stay tuned and grab your spot for this complimentary session. But for now, as we wrap up this session, if you are open to a few compassionate reflections, I invite you to gently explore these questions. What are your current struggles as a parent? And how does reactivity tend to show up in your parenting? Especially, when do you notice it most? What are the triggers that contribute to those moments? And where do you think these triggers come from? Your past, your stress, your expectations? And if you were to identify just one small thing that you can do differently to be more present with yourself and with your child, starting from right now, what would that be? All right. So I truly hope these reflections support your journey towards more peace, presence, and more harmony, not just in your parenting, but throughout your family system. So thank you for being here with me today. And if there is just one thing I hope you carry forward from this episode, it's that parenting matters, and so does courage to pause, reflect, and choose differently. Until next time, I wish you presence, patience, and peace. Take care. I will see you soon.
Discover coaching or become a globally accredited professional coach. Ignite Global 360, your professional development partner.